On segment 2 tonight, we take you to a place you actually can't get to from here. Today is the 35th anniversary of the end of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the day when the United States and the Soviet Union pulled back from the brink of nuclear war. The crisis had been brought on by Soviet nuclear missiles based in Cuba, just 90 miles south of Miami. All these years later, Cuba remains the forbidden country to most Americans, an island shrouded in mystery. This month, Channel 2 reporter Craig Heaps, photographer Nick Soares, and assistant news director Tony Bonilla traveled to Cuba to see what that island nation is like. And tonight we begin a three-part series, Cuba, the Forbidden Country.
Cuba is a land of beautiful places and beautiful people. And for almost 40 years, U.S. law has said Americans, with rare exception, can't go there, unless you're a journalist or on official government business. We went to Cuba, and here is some of what we found. First, we found a place where, even as foreign journalists, we were free to go anywhere and talk to anyone without restrictions. Second, we found a nation looking for a way to survive. Because its sponsor, the Soviet Union, collapsed, Cuba is now a Marxist nation reaching out to foreign capitalists.
The economy's not good, but we support the government. And up to this point, we haven't gone hungry.
And we found people who greeted us warmly, most saying little about the fact that we came from the United States, their Cold War enemy. But never far from the surface here in Havana is the subject of the relationship between Cuba and its giant neighbor 90 miles to the north. This woman didn't want us to show her face, and she wouldn't tell us her name, but she lectured us about the U.S. embargo against trade with Cuba.
El embargo es sencillamente.
The embargo is simply an aggression of the North American government against our country, Cuba. They haven't been able to overthrow us, and they will never overthrow us. We'll burn the whole island before we would let the Yankees into our country.
It seems they know more about us than we know about them. Even these schoolboys have an opinion about Norteamericanos, Americans.
Some are good, some are not good. There's a group of religious people that comes down here to bring us things that we need, so the country will have necessities.
As you travel around Havana, you can still see the enormous homes that in the 1950s housed Cuba's elite, the people who ran Cuba before Fidel Castro took over. They owned businesses or were part of the government of Fulgencio Batista, and many of them fled to Florida, where they now campaign for the overthrow of Castro and his communist government. 40 years ago, one family lived here. Now, several families share the space. Flora Sotolongo still remembers the old days.
Estaba buena. ¿Y ahora? And how are things now?
Here, we're living, but I don't know how good it is.
Another legacy of the 1950s, American cars. The United States has not imported autos to Cuba since 1961, but you can find a rolling museum of fins and fenders all over this island nation, kept running by the ingenuity of their owners. Now, more and more, Cuba's turning once again to foreigners to survive. Although American law prohibits most U.S. citizens from coming here, no such restrictions apply in other countries. So they come from those nations for fun or for profit. Canadian businessman Barry Murphy has been here 5 times.
They are the nicest people you could meet, and I'll tell you, they are hard-working people here. If those engineers and mechanics had the same tools that we have in North America, they'd beat the crap out of us. They really would. These guys work. They're not slackers. They would be the kings of the Caribbean. These guys are smart, they're well-educated, and they're willing to work.
And in Cuba, you are never far from signs of the revolution. The revolution that transformed Cuba in the 1960s, and that the signs promise will continue in the 1990s. A revolution that must now make room for compromise. Compromise that will allow Cuba to survive in the 21st century. In Havana, Cuba, I'm Craig Heaps, and that's tonight's segment 2.
Tomorrow night, Craig takes a look at the relationship between the governments of Cuba and the United States and the law that prohibits most Americans from traveling to Cuba. Here's a preview.
The Cubans actually welcome American tourists, not even stamping their passports, so U.S. immigration has no clue if they've been here. Even a woman who angrily lectured us about U.S. policy welcomed Americans.
What would you like to say to the people of the United States?
To the people to come, to tell Clinton to let them come here and see what goes on in this country.
That's part 2 of Cuba, the Forbidden Country, tomorrow night on the 10 o'clock news.